We are back. Yesterday I did some work on the painting, and we're going to do about another half hour today. I'm going to focus on darkening up these areas. Notice here on this back one that it's not pure dark. There's a line of those seeds that get caught. Here again also, it's like a straight line or a curved line that's just a little bit lighter. I'll try and paint around it. I might blot some of it out. Here there's a little bit of variation, but not much. Color-wise, I'm using sepia and looks like burnt sienna or oxide brown. And rather than put it in as a wash, I definitely am shaping my marks a little bit. It helps me to complete that shape correctly and leave a couple little holes where the lighter brown is sticking through. Not a lot, but some. Maybe we'll make the same light area as the other ones, but it'll be more severe, something like that. This also gives us a chance to refine the dark shape a little bit, which also refines the shape of the flower itself a little bit. So all we're focusing on is this inside this one sunflower at this moment, so we can be a little bit more controlled and more specific about the shape to help tighten that up and give it more of the look that the other one has. So I did that. Look what I did again. I did the one that was in the position that I should have done first. That's unfortunate because it means I have to work a little bit more carefully where I put my hand down on the paper. There we go. Again, we're taking the time now to refine those shapes. If that dark isn't quite dark enough, we can even throw a little bit of Diox purple into it and do a couple of more dark dots towards the bottom of the shape. It just makes it more believable and readable. I like the shape of this one here, but there's more. If you look at this closely, there's more up and down sort of shapes that make those the ends of those petals. So I'm putting those in, and I'm doing it's like a dot and dash sort of thing. I'm giving myself spaces where that lighter color is shining through. And refining the organicness of the shape. But that looks really pretty good. The next thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna clean up a well on my palette. And I'm gonna mix up a glaze. And even though I have that color pretty close on the lily, I'm gonna pink it up so I can darken it. I want it to push off against the yellow of the sunflowers. So I'm gonna use some pink, and I'll put a little cadmium red into it too to push it more to the warm side. And then come in and glaze it over most of the lily. I will look for some shapes that are lighter where I can maybe leave some of the light showing. And that'll help us define our flower a little bit. And I'm also gonna make a much warmer glaze as well. That's definitely more on the yellow-orange side, so I can still get some darker tone, but give it some variety as well. I'm trying to look at the petals themselves and see where I can leave areas that I don't paint that will help define the flowers. Here that goes behind the other petal. It's a little bit darker, so I beefed that up a little bit just by grabbing some of that brown that we used actually in the petals. Coated that whole leaf, but then there's a light spot, so I'm just drying out my brush, wetting it with water, then drying it out and coming back and pulling a little bit, just so we can get some of that rounding shape where it's catching the light a little bit there. There's a dark shape in between these two petals that I'm gonna catch later when it's dry. Just there's a little dimple of the dark as it comes down here. There. All right, that gives us a nice feel. All right, I think the lily's starting to take shape now. Just kind of do little touches here and there, but that's starting to read much better. And I think it's going to allow me to even darken the sunflowers a little bit more. So in fact, I'm going to get a little bit more pink in here, develop some of the depth just a little bit more. because I've done that, now I feel like I can, and that brown has set pretty well that I put in the middle of the sunflower. So I can come back in and push that sunflower orangey kind of yellow color a little bit harder than we had it before. As if I don't throw my brush all over the place. Now I gotta clean out my brush and see if I can't. I got these spatters on here I'm gonna try and fix up right now before it gets too late. Okay. Get back to yeah, that's, now we're starting to hit the values that I really wanted to get for the sunflower. That one I did almost entirely. And here I'm gonna start to pick some petal shapes rather than filling in the whole thing. More like that. And here too, let's start to define there we go. Now I'm deepening up this color a little bit, and I'm going to draw this shape here. Something like that. And while this is wet, I can drop some dark in down here at the bottom of it where it gets darker, and plop some more dark in to the middle of that wet spot and help it define that shape. And then we'll come back in with the greens and finish that up. All right, that's really starting to take shape. Now here, on the edge of this leaf, now that it's dried a little bit, I'm coming in with some damp water or damp brush and just blotting out. There's a highlight on there that I'm just catching. I just want to get that. Okay. Next thing we can turn to is I'm waking up the greens that are on my palette from yesterday and some of the darks, and just coming in behind this sunflower here and using this dark at the base of this, kind of randomize some dots, just kind of look at it and make it your own. But just use the dark shapes to define the sunflower a little bit more from the outside edge. And it pushes that sunflower forward. Okay. We can also take some of this dark and look in here, and don't cover everything. Leave some of the green showing through, but start to beef up inside of there. Definitely behind this flower a little bit. Some of the darkest bits are underneath this petal, so we can come in and do this right now. And also here, there should be no white showing underneath this sunflower. We can actually use this dark to again help re-establish the shape of this. Same thing back here. Let's do some random shapes, darks that will, and I've put a little bit of blue into the dark now, so it's just got a little bit of different color, and just trying to, again, use the dark to carve out the shape of the sunflower even a little bit more, and random marks in here as there's stuff on top and behind. There we go. That's really starting to look pretty good. I'm gonna just blot that so it doesn't run on me. I'll load up some of that dark into my brush and just do a little more spatter work here and here and here. Maybe at the outside edge of here. And if it's too strong, just blot some of it back with your paper towel. Loading up a little green in my brush, and I'm using the darker bits to define the edge of this leaf. So get some dark in here, some dark behind here, and then this leaf is much darker. As is this one. And again, we can use the dark, even connect them together if we have to help define that shape of the sunflower. Even lose this edge here if we want. And don't be afraid to leave a little bit of the green, the lighter green showing through. Just a little bit of it. And then there's I'm gonna make a glaze. There's a shadow that comes down here into this leaf. I'm just gonna throw that in there. Okay. Nothing has to be specific. You can just kind of look at it and say, okay, I'm gonna do this, and then kind of follow through on it. Change the tone of your green a little bit, go to a cooler one, use some Viridian in some places. Again, we can use this to define. Now if I darken it up, I can. Use this to define the bottom edge of this sunflower, and also this right here, we can lose this edge into the green with that warm. Okay. I don't want this to run on me. I'm gonna blot this right here. Top's looking really good. I'm gonna wake up from yesterday. That green color that we used to glaze the jar, and I'm gonna add some lavender to it. It's gonna get it a little bit more blue. I wanna darken and blue up this color right above and even at the water line. And we can put it down here as well. Okay, that starts to really give us that dimension we want. And I'm trying to get this darker on this side of the jar, even though it's catching a highlight, or I've put some masking fluid in to make that highlight in the painting. I still want to have this darker to emphasize that. And the other way we're going to emphasize that light passing through there is in tomorrow when we start the next session. I'm going to turn this sideways and wet this whole area and come in with a dark to define that shape and darken the shadow up more. And then we'll do one more pass at that to get the wall line. But we're coming really close to being in the home stretch on this guy. We can even now this should be dry enough that I can come in and start to put the stems in. And I'm going to put one more because I got really the heights are a little bit too close together. I want to break that up a little bit. So I'm going to change some things. Like that. And we can vary those up by just, while they're still wet, dropping a little bit of a dark. I'm using purple into the brown. And then come in really fine, just the very tip of the brush, and just draw those stems, and do them as broken lines. You don't have to have every bit of every line. In fact, I think they read better if you don't have all of it. There we go. And I don't know, these may have a certain number and not as many as I've put in there, but I'm okay with that. This value starts to feel really good. I feel like we've got our light and dark relationships going on. I think we can just take that, some of that blue, violeted up green that we used on the other side, and we can even, in this kind of pie wedge shape, here, put it in there. And that light back there is a little bit too light, so I can just put a little bit of it on there. Okay. I think now I see where I'm going with the lily, and I can even maybe come up with a couple little more hints of dark. Not a lot of them, but a few. That really does start to bring all of this home. Okay. Here, I wet my brush and then blotted it out so I can fade that a little bit. There, okay. I feel like that reads pretty well. By wetting that, I get some a little bit further away action on some of that spatter stuff. And don't be afraid to pull some of it back if it's too much. There we go. Okay. Before tomorrow, I'm going to do this right now so that this part is dry when we start this tomorrow. Right where the wall line is, I'm putting that darker line in and bringing it down so that this will be all dry when we come into it tomorrow, and I won't have to fuss with that as I build those other shadow shapes. Shadows are always darker closer to where they're cast, and they get lighter as they go out. You can make them a little bit cooler. There. Okay. Dry out my brush a little bit and just chop off the end of that. I don't know what happened there. That's some sort of spatter, and we'll get that when we darken up that shadow. That dark shadow is what's going to push all of that forward. It's looking good. All right, we're going to stop here. I'm going to let this dry. Tomorrow I'm going to spend another half hour on it, and I'll wrap that up and send that out Tuesday afternoon as the finishing touches for all the folks that are working on this outside of class. All right, there we go. All right, that's it for today. We'll come back tomorrow and finish this up. Hi everyone, we're pretty far along into our mason jar, and lily and sunflowers. Here's what I want to do to finish this up today. I want to darken the shadow So we're gonna turn the paper sideways, wet the whole area next to the jar and under these leaves, and start to darken softly away from that blue light that's coming through there, and just randomly put some darks in here. We'd put this dark in at the end of yesterday so that I wouldn't have to come back and redo that, because that has a nice hard edge on it. So we're gonna do that. I wanna scrub out some highlights on this particular piece of sunflower and then darken some bits of that. And then the last thing we're gonna do is remove the masking fluid and do any touch-ups on the letters or areas where I had masking fluid. Okay, so let's get right to it. You can hear I'm still kind of drippy. All right. Let's say this area here, just gonna come in and work it with a damp brush. Oops, sorry about that. And then blot, and that gives us a nice highlight. Clean out our brush. And then let's do another one here. Too wet. There we go. Okay. There. It was a little bit too flat. We can add some dark back in, so we'll get 3 layers of levels in there of value, but I wanted to do that first. Go. A little bit bigger brush. I'm gonna get in here and get some water in here and let it seep in. And you can, towards the end, you can leave some spots bare. I want to get this water to seep in while I mix up the dark color. Which I'm going to use some indigo. And a little something to warm that up. I'm going to try a little orange. Just so that it's not too cool. All right, and now the reason why I wet all this first is so that I keep that soft edge. Coming from underneath the jar, or behind the jar rather. And I'm leaving some holes in here. Just darken it up here, closest to behind that blue light that's passing through there. We want to have this to be a soft edge. Okay. And let's turn it, see what it looks like. Okay, that looks kind of random and shadowy. I like that. I like the softness there. We got what we wanted. I'm just gonna break up the edges on this stuff. And take the shadow all the way to the edge of the paper. Like that. Okay. Shadow starts at the bottom of the bottle, like that, and then we can come all the way over here, just do a broken line where that tabletop is, clean off our brush, just smoosh that up a little bit so that it's not solid. Just like that. All right. I'm gonna pause here because I'm gonna dry this, and then we're gonna remove the masking fluid and do our final touch-ups. All right, we are back. I'm gonna remove the masking fluid now, do any touch-ups with that, soften any edges, put any shadows on the letters in the jar, and then do any final touch-ups with some darks we might need. So the first thing I'm gonna do is use my finger and rub out. Just make sure your finger's clean and that the paper's dry. I'm gonna rub out my masking fluid. That reveals these beautiful whites that we didn't get covered, and it allowed us to paint very freely in the early stages. Okay. Good. Now, what are some things that I want to touch up while I'm here? I'm going to come in with a little bit stronger dark in the base of these stems. Just give them a little bit of pop. Okay. I'm going to use a flat brush, about a 1/4 inch wide, between a 1/4 and a half. Wet it, take some of the moisture out, and just soften up some of the edges where I've taken away the masking fluid. You can even get a little bit of tone back in there if you want. But the idea is you don't want that glaring hard edge, at least not there. Here, you kind of do. Here, maybe not as much. You want to break some of that up a little bit. Okay. Same thing. This one is actually like the light reflecting on that leaf. So I'm going to give that mostly some vertical lines and soften and soften and soften and soften and blur and blur and blur. I can use some of that behind there. Okay. Now, I'm gonna mix up a color based on the blue of the jar, but I'm gonna add some. I'm gonna darken it with some palette scraps that are browny and purpley. I want to get it a little bit darker, and we can come in and if I look at the Z, there's some dark there, and there's some dark there, and underneath. Now I'm just underneath and on the left is basically the move I'm making. Okay, something like that. Let that dry a little, and we're going to lighten those lights. I'll probably glaze a little bit of a blue over it. These can get softened a little bit. Just wet your brush and then take most of the water out of your brush and just like up here, just kind of wiggle it around a little bit. You just don't want those edges to be as hard or the highlights to be as pure white as they were. Still got some more masking fluid I forgot to remove. Try to remember to get all of it. I'm going to mix up a fairly strong dark green and come in and put a couple more stems in. We can even darken under here and pull that down a little bit. That kind of finishes that off. I'm going to go back to that small brush again with that bluey greeny color that I mixed up. And I'm going to come in underneath the threads on the jar, like that. right down this line of the highlight. Like that. Okay. That reads pretty well. While I have the small brush in my hand, I'm strengthening up my yellow color from yesterday that's still on my palette. And I strengthened it with a little bit of purple to neutralize it, because that's kind of a complement, and actually take down the tone on that even more. And just look for a couple of spots where I can drop in dark petals. We put the light ones in, now we're contrasting them with some darker ones. There. Without having to get too fussy, we've got that in there. I'm gonna go back to a larger brush, reactivating that puddle of blue-green that was the jar color. Added a little bit more cobalt teal to it. And now I'm gonna wash over the entire jar, the lights and the darks, everything, to punch up the jar just a little bit. I'm even going to go over those highlights and over the greens that are painted in the jar. That's looking really good. And what we're going to do is I'll get this all covered, and then I'm going to come back and blot out some of the highlights that we had the masking fluid on, and then we've just painted over. Because you're like, Carl, why did you just paint over that? Well, we want some tone from the glass in it. We don't want it to be pure. Pure white would not work. And bring this down. Right there in that middle behind the EZ, it kind of shows the light of the wall behind it, so you can leave that kind of open. And then right here at the bottom, we can collect some dark, like that. And then just above that dark, just pop in some of that teal right into that wet and let that kind of mingle around. That's kind of how you'll get that without trying to paint it too much. Now, come back in. Re-wet this highlight a little bit. And pull out some of the white, so it's not perfectly white, but it's got a little bit of tint to it. And then come back in and re-emphasize some of those dark shadows that we put on the embossed lettering, like that. And while we have that orange still mixed up with a darker yellow, we can do one more pass into the yellow here and just put some darker kind of randomy shapes towards the bottom where the light isn't hitting it, and maybe one there. And then just do some dots and dashes in here with that orange. It's just purpled up a little bit to make it a little bit darker. This is a little bit more abstract-y. This whole bottom here. Now the bottom actually reflects a lot of that green that's in there too. So you can add some green into that color. Darken this shape while you're here. There. Okay, that's looking really good. I think we've got it. We can add a few spots of darker green in here. Maybe you want to, if you have any white hiding underneath your flowers, you might want to just tap that out. Here also, just a little bit darker. There we go. Okay. Just gonna pick this up with my brush so it doesn't run on me. I'm gonna take a little bit of a, don't worry, I'm gonna blot those out. I wanted to get a little bit of pink up into my spatter up there. So I just loaded some up on my brush and then spattered away. And that may be too much spatter. That's a matter of taste. I think I'm gonna use my brush and just soften this edge just a little bit right here. Come back in, dry out the brush, and just pull it away. Just soften that edge a little bit. Okay. That dark mixed up. I can put a little bit more dark. And this is what you do at the end. You just look for things that you can do little tiny touches to get it to read perfectly. Or I guess believably is really the better word than perfectly. Do a little bit more with that flower. Just let your brush dance around a little bit. Okay. All right. Okay, I think that's enough. I'm gonna even blot a little bit of that back. I think that's our painting, guys. I'm still testing positive, but I hope for my in-person class at Mounts Botanical that a week from now on Tuesday that I'll be able to come and paint with you guys. So in the meantime, this was part 4. You've got all 4 parts to do this painting entirely on your own, watching the video if you want. When we come in, we'll pick up in person where we left off last time. Talk to you soon.